Hi there, my name's Mark Baker, and in this video I want to talk to you about a new book that I've recently published on Amazon. The title of the book is the Behringer X32 and Midas M32 Handbook. But the important part is the subtitle, which is the ultimate guide to routing. Now, if you own one of these mixers, or you have to use one of these mixers on a regular basis, you'll no doubt have come across the complexity of the routing tables within these mixers. And they really are difficult. They're complex. Even if you've used lots of mixers before in your past, say Allen Heath or other types of mixers, the X32 and the M32 are very different, and they do routing in a very complex way. So for the last 12 months I've spent my time documenting every routing table within the mixer and looked at every signal source that can come into those routing tables and go out again, and worked out what the use cases are for each of those signal sources to pass through the routing tables. And alongside the textual descriptions, I've produced diagrams to help explain what is actually going on. So let us have a brief look at what is inside this handbook. So this is the handbook. It's roughly about 260 odd pages long, and as I've mentioned, it essentially goes through every routing table one by one. So a quick look at the index of the contents, So you've got an introduction, and then I give an overview of the entire mixer. So that's to try and put all the routing tables into context together. Now initially that might blow your mind a bit, but when you've been through the other routing tables, you can come back to this. It'll make a lot more sense, but it's useful to see them all together in context and see how they all interact with each other rather than just looking at them individually. So then we go through each routing table in turn. First the inputs routing table, then auxiliary in, inputs, the AES50 routing page, the card page, XLR inputs, the out 1 to 16, the auxiliary outs, and the ultranet outputs. Then we go through the two additional routing tables, the user in table and the user out table, both of which you should be spending most of your time in, and we'll talk about that in the book. Then we add on a bit talk about routing, a little section on matrices, and a bit about tap points, helping you to understand the different signal points along the trajectory of the signal that you can tap off to send places. And then there's 3 routing examples at the end. First of all, the routing example for a 5-piece band, how you would set up this mixer for that. Secondly, if you wanted to use multiple mixers, so for example, if you were using one mixer, one X32 or M32 for the front of house mix, and then a second mixer at the side of the stage for mixing the in-ear monitors for the band, then how do you do that with one set of signals? Well, this routing example will show you how to do that. And the third example is a front of house and broadcast mix. So that's where you might be recording a band or a talk or whatever, and it needs to sound good in the building you're in, but also you want to broadcast it and live stream it, and you need different EQs and settings for that broadcast mix. So this helps you helps describe how you would do that. So quick skim through past the introduction. First of all, the routing overview. This is the section that really just looks at the whole thing, all the routing tables as a whole. And there's a diagram there showing each routing table and how they interact. and this section covers all that, the integration of all those routing tables together. And then we literally go through one at a time each routing table. The inputs first, giving an indication of what the sources, the signal sources are for that table, and then going through each of those signal sources in turn, and explaining why you'd want to map those signal sources to those outputs. What are the scenarios? And each time we do this, I show the settings, the routing settings in the X32 edit application form, and then also in the desktop display format as well. So depending which display type you prefer to use, it's got both of those in there. And so then we do the auxiliary ins, and for example the AS50 page, and this goes on. And then for each of these scenarios, these use cases, I produce a diagram like this, which shows you the signals coming in to the mixer, the routing table it will go through, and then on to often a stage box and out to the big wide world. So there's one of these for each scenario. There's one of these diagrams, as you can see. This is an example for the ultranet signals that you'd send off through the Ethernet, ultranet Ethernet signal to a monitor, P16 monitor box for in-ear monitoring. And this goes on through all of the different scenarios, all of the different routing tables, one at a time. Then after we've gone through all of those, we get to the patch point routing user in section. And as I mentioned before, this is one of the most important routing tables that you'll come across. So it describes how you'll go about setting this up. This is the sort of routing mapping type table you'll end up with. And this is an overview of what can come into this routing table and what it can drive, what it can affect. And again, I go through all the different scenarios in that, and then similarly the user out routing table, what things can you map in this user out table? Again, a similar routing mapping configuration and the overview of the whole thing there. We then go into the last few sections, talk about the talkback routing. What's that all about? How does it work? A bit about matrices. What are they? What are they for? How would you map them? And then finally the tap points. So with the signal trajectory going through the mixer, what do the tap points refer to? Which part of the signal are you actually looking at when you send a signal somewhere at a particular tap point? And then of course we've got the three routing examples. So in this first one, the 5-piece band, we start with the requirement, writing the requirements for this setting in a show file. So what do you want it to do? What do you want to achieve? And you document this in a show file format. And then given that as a requirement, you can then set up your mixer, channel settings appropriately, and then all your routing settings appropriately. All your mute groups, your DCA groups, and then at the end there's an overview of the entire 5-piece band configuration. So all your instruments and your mics coming in through a stage box, in through a whole raft of routing tables before they go back out to the stage box, to some in-ear monitors, and also out to the main left-right speakers. The second example is the multiple mixers. This is where you've got a front of house mixer mixing the signals coming in, and then you also got a monitor mixer trying to mix the same signals but for the monitors to feed the band on stage. And then the final routing example is the front of house and broadcast mix. So where you want to mix for the people in the room, but also you want to mix for the people listening on a live stream. So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. 260 pages of it with an index at the back. If you're having any troubles with routing, I highly recommend getting hold of this and studying it. It's not something you'll pick up instantly, but through studying these diagrams, you'll start to get a grip on how the whole routing thing works. And then going back to the overview page at the end, you'll start to see how all these things work together to get signals coming in through the various routes through the mixer, and then out of the mixer into the right places, the places you want the signals to go. So it's available now on Amazon worldwide, so just search for X32 Handbook and you'll find it on the Amazon that's most relevant to yourself. And I hope you find it useful, and if you do, let me know. Thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you've enjoyed this. Thank you.